Jerry and Charlie riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your fans. Now get up out your seat. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Shea Station.
Today is March 24th. It is our fourth and final team profile and projection episode for our New York Mets. Today we're talking all about the starting rotation. Opening day is this week, Jerry. Not actually for us because we're recording this in advance, but when this comes out, baseball season is probably going to be fully in swing in just 72 hours, and that's very exciting. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jack, a.k.a. Jolly. Joining me is Jerry Blevins. Jerry, how you doing?
I'm lovely. Yeah, man. As of recording this, the season in Japan starts a week from today.
Huge.
So we got real baseball that counts coming right around the corner. Very exciting.
It is very exciting, Jerry, and hopefully things have been stabilized with the starting rotation. The position unit on the Mets that's taken some hits early in the season, spearheaded by Shawn Manaea, who's starting the season late with an injury. He came back. He re-signed on a 3-year deal. We lost him to a right oblique strain. Unlikely to return before late April. Hopefully there's no new developments after that. And then Frankie Montas, a high-grade lat strain. We're probably not going to see him for a little bit. So the Mets will be leaning on their depth in the rotation early in the season. And you look across the board, and it's not exactly marquee household names, but I said this to you before we started recording. Something about this Mets development team, this Mets pitching lab, has me very optimistic about what these guys can achieve.
No, I think you nailed it, though. The names on paper don't jump off as World Series contender because you're missing top-end talent. They didn't go out and get one of the big names out in the free agent market. But history has shown us that Jeremy Hefner, this pitch lab, the pitching, mind conglomerate there, that they're able to get the best out of what they have. And they do have some talent. I mean, Kodai Senga coming back. You hope he returns to form and he stays healthy. David Peterson looked the best he's ever looked last year when he came back from the hip surgery. They brought Clay Holmes in to be a starter, and he's looked great in spring training. He's got elite stuff. And then you have, Tyler Megill, Griffin Canning, Paul Blackburn, all kind of vying for that, fourth, fifth starter, trying to eke it out for the return of Shawn Manaea when he's healthy. And then later on in the season, Frankie Montas, who went down, he'll be back hopefully before the All-Star break. These guys know how to get the best out of the pitchers that they have, and they're going to need it because this has been the question mark from the get-go. Can this starting rotation compete with the likes of Philadelphia, with the likes of the Dodgers? I think they will be competitive. I think that's the answer. They have a great bullpen to back them up. They have really good defense behind them. And the offense should put up enough numbers to help these guys be competitive. So I like the names. I don't love the lack of top-end depth, like top-end arms.
I think I'm with you there, and we're going to deep dive into what they did last year, what's in store for this year, all the stuff you need to know about each of these guys. But before we do that, Jerry, for one last time in March, I want to shout out Field of Dreams Whiskey, baby!
Yes,
because
sir.
That is our presenting sponsor for our team profile and projection episodes. Whiskey from the most famous cornfield in the world, the Field of Dreams cornfield in Iowa. Brought to you by former major leaguers, made for baseball fans and baseball players. They got 2 new whiskeys available, Field of Dreams Small Batch Bourbon and Field of Dreams Player Series Bourbon. The shipments are right around the corner because opening day is right around the corner. So you can click the link in our description, drinkfieldofdreams.com/Shea. It's available in stores throughout 10 states, but you can get bottled, delivered right to your door. It makes for a perfect gift. Also, maybe just a gift for yourself because it's a wonderful product to enjoy on your own. Like I said before, made by former major leaguers for baseball fans. That's pretty much the best part of it. Featuring one of over 25 big league legends hidden under the cap is the small batch bourbon. I'm really excited to see what baseball legends we can get from that. Just can't recommend this thing enough. Jerry works tirelessly on it. It's his, I guess, third hustle because you got, your SNY gig, your Shea Station gig, and your whiskey gig. But yeah, can't recommend this enough, and always fun to shout out a friend. So drinkfieldofdreams.com/Shay. We do have some Mets legends, do we?
They're coming. So that'll be exciting.
How much can you tease?
They'll know the names and they'll be happy to find them. So we're trying to get into more regional stuff as well. We're not in the New York market in stores, but we can ship there. So yeah, we're trying to find people that fans will love, especially baseball fans of certain teams, a little bit of a deeper dive. So this will be fun.
Drinkfieldofdreams.com/Shay. Get your bottle today and act fast because they usually sell out like this. So highly recommend it, and shout out Field of Dreams Whiskey. Thank you to them for sponsoring Shea Station. Heck yeah.
Yeah. Keeping it going.
All right, let's dive in. Last year, the Mets rotation did not have a good reputation going into the season. Very similar to kind of the vibe this year. It was headlined by the trio of Shawn Manaea, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino. There were reclamation projects everywhere. Guys that the Mets were hoping to get the absolute best out of. A lot of question marks entering the season. In the first half, much similar to the bullpen, walks were a major issue. Pitching deep into games were a major issue for this starting rotation. But just like the bullpen, they took form in the second half and really showed up when it mattered most. Obviously, Shawn Manaea was the headliner of this rotation. He threw 181 innings last year, a 2.8 F4 on the season, a whip of 1.08, an ERA of 3.47. He returned to the Mets on a 3-year deal. But you got great performances all throughout. You're not going to see massive inning totals from a lot of the guys. David Peterson was great last year, but 121 innings. Tyler Megill picked up the Mets in certain spots, 78 innings. These are not guys that had massive workloads, and that's kind of an ushering in of a new era in baseball altogether. Also, they only got 5 1/3 innings out of their expected ace in Kodai Senga. So it was a pretty chaotic year for the starting Mets rotation, but in the end, they finished top 5 in home run per 9, top 5 in innings pitched, top 10 in ground ball rate, and the third best mark in average against on the year, kind of middle of the pack in ERA and whip. But overall, a really good performance by this unit that didn't have a lot of high expectations going into the season. The vibe is similar, but now I feel like Mets fans are still expecting a good performance out of some of the names here. And some of the names here include Griffin Canning, who led the American League in earned runs allowed last year, Clay Holmes, who hasn't started a game since 2018, Tyler Megill, who has kind of been a quadruple A fringe guy for the Mets for the past 3 years at this point. That's 60% of your starting rotation for the Mets opening day roster right now. A lot of question marks, not to mention Kodai Senga, who's coming off an injury-riddled year. There's no real slam dunk to look at in this rotation currently. I guess, where do you want to start?
Well, I think we need to start at the top. I want to start with Shawn Manaea. I think, obviously he's going to start on the IL, but to me, he is the epitome of what Met starting pitching has been over the last few years. A guy that is adapted to find the best version of himself. The big mark was when he saw Chris Sale pitch and said, hey, I can do that. He found that comfortable arm slot, that delivery, that deception, and then he maximized himself there. His second half was unbelievable. He was one of the most dominant pitchers in the league. He got tired in the playoffs, and they rode him for a long time, but he really found himself. And to me, that's the epitome of what this is going to be. They're trying to find the best version of every pitcher that they have and maximize it because they've spent so much money elsewhere. They kind of were unwilling to give Max Fried the 8 years that he got in New York. They just thought that they could figure it out better in the rotation, which is a little worrisome because that's your marquee. You need good starting pitching, but really they're going for competitive starting pitching. And I think they have start with Shawn Manaea. This guy is a competitor through and through. I think on any given day, he could be competitive with a Chris Sale, with a Shohei if he's starting. I think he can stand and give the Mets a chance to win a ball game against any pitcher in the league.
Yeah, his arc was one of the most inspiring on the 2024 Mets, and a roster full of inspiring stories. Mets fans really gravitated towards him. You could tell that he loved being a Met, and it's great that he's back here. But what you alluded to before was, I think we both thought that a move was going to be made for someone to be considered a bona fide ace to join this team, whether it was Corbin Burns, who I really thought the Mets would at least try and go after. They showed no real interest in that at all. The Max Fried length of the contract got a little bit too long, I think, for anyone's liking. And then there was a lot of rumors around the Mets and Roki Sasaki, who ended up going to the Dodgers, just like everyone expected. And then Garrett Crochet, which I felt was potentially the most likely, but the Mets just didn't have the farm system to compete with the Red Sox in those trade deals. But it feels like the Mets finished as a finalist for all of those guys, sans Burns, but they ended up with Shawn Manaea, and they're putting a lot of eggs in that Shawn Manaea basket on this 3-year deal. I'm not too worried about the oblique strain injury. It seems like a pretty mild case, and the Mets are being very careful with it, but it does hurt to not have your ace on opening day for the 4th year in a row. DeGrom was 2021. I believe Scherzer was hurt on opening day in 22. Verlander in 23. Senga last year, and now Shawn Manaea, so 5 years. But the Mets are going to have to prevail. They're going to get Kodai Senga back, and he's probably going to spearhead this rotation. But what you're missing in Shawn Manaea, last year, he was a top 20 pitcher in ERA, top 20 in strikeout per 9, home run per 9, innings pitched, and then it gets even better. Batting average against, he was 7th overall with a 201 mark. He was right up there with all the best pitchers in the game last year, and looking at his career log entering last year, it's pretty remarkable stuff. He had been bouncing around 4 different teams in 4 years, always threw the innings, but never really got the results you'd expect out of him after a really terrific breakout season in 2018. It was kind of just an ebb and flow style of career for him until he really found his footing last year. So I'm very excited to see what Shawn Manaea can bring to the table. It's going to hurt to miss him for whatever it might be, the first 2 weeks, first 4 weeks of the season. But Kodai Senga, all eyes go to him as he looks to be the de facto opening day starter for the Mets, coming off a year where he threw just 5 1/3 innings, one nice start against the Braves, and then a couple playoff outings. We have not seen a lot of him in the past calendar year after what was a really terrific year in 2023 that unfortunately kind of just got wasted by an underperforming team.
Yeah, I love Kodai Senga. I love what I saw from him in his rookie year. I love what I saw from him last year. Obviously, the injuries, only making one start, coming back into the playoffs and trying to just will himself into it, and he didn't have it. But what I saw from him last year was the willingness to put himself on the line, put his body on the line, to do whatever it took to be a part of this team on the field. He came back against those Braves and looked dominant, and then hurt his calf, like fielding a PFP. I missed seeing him pitch last year. I wanted to see the next evolution because the competitiveness that I saw is a key for me to see a guy that has great stuff that we all knew coming over, that he had really good stuff. The Ghost Fork is properly named to have a pitch that has a cool nickname. It's that devastating. But the competitiveness that I saw is what makes a good pitcher a great pitcher, and a great pitcher an elite pitcher. So I love what I've seen from him. I hope he can stay healthy. That is the biggest question mark. His he can be an ace. And even with Manaea down to begin, to me, he was in the conversation for opening day start regardless, because he was supposed to be their ace last year and didn't show anything that he wasn't. So I expect him to come in and be the guy to anchor it down early in the season and hold the fort for these guys in Manaea when he comes back. he never really, has a breaking ball, but he deploys it enough to keep guys guessing. The ghost fork is elite. I need that pitching velo to be there for him. He's got to be in the 96, 97, 98 range with that fastball because it's so straight. But I have all-star aspirations for this guy. I think he's good enough to be the de facto ace, as you put it. I think he's good enough to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, in 23, he was the bona fide ace of the New York Mets. 29 starts, a sub-3 ERA. He struck out over 200 batters, finished 7th in Cy Young voting. It was truly a remarkable year for Kodai Senga. If there's any silver lining to what was a disappointing injury riddle last year, it does mean that the vesting option for this year most likely won't be activated. In his contract, if Senga had pitched 400 innings in his first 3 years, he would have been able to opt out after this season. And his contract is very good. $15 million a year for a starter of his quality is great value. For Senga, the injury concerns were always there, even when he was still over in Japan before he even signed with the Mets. He had missed serious time in various seasons with, not always arm injuries, but just various body injuries. And I'm hoping that we get a clean bill of health this year for Kodai Senga. Obviously, I think a 6-man setup would benefit him. He's not getting any younger. He's going to be 32 this year. But the Mets are going to need him big time this year. But depending on when Manaea comes back, what exactly they get out of Frankie Montas in the first year of his new deal. David Peterson with a full season workload for the first time in a while. They're going to need a beacon of consistency in this rotation. And for a long time in 2023, for more than half the season, Kodai Senga was the stopper in that rotation, a rotation that should have been headlined by Verlander and Scherzer, with Senga as kind of a bonus piece. So the Mets are going to be leaning on him big time this year. Projections like him, which isn't surprising because he's got nasty stuff. But I love that you brought up the velocity because, everything gets better if Senga is sitting in the mid to upper 90s. The ghost fork plays more. His cutter is much better. It's going to be, I'm really interested to see his April, like how he comes out and starts the season. If you remember in 23, his debut outing was pretty rough. I mean, he didn't have control of the zone. It was very erratic. He was finding his footing, and it was kind of like that for all of his first month before he really settled in May. I wonder if we have that period this year or if Kodai Senga is just ready to get back to work, because when he came back midseason last year, he looked dominant.
He really did. I expect him to come out. Maybe the cold weather might be a little tough. A lot of Japanese starting pitchers have trouble in the cold weather because they play in domes in Japan most of the time. But I'm expecting a return to form, all-star level, kind of pitcher, and the Mets need it.
And pretty much the only other name in this rotation that you feel like you might know what you're going to get is David Peterson, who, I can't lie, he shocked me thoroughly last year with how good he was, especially in August and September when we needed great starting pitching badly. He finished the year with 121 innings, a 2.90 ERA, was worth 2 F4 on the season, was the second best pitcher on the Mets staff. And this was a long time coming. A guy we first saw come up in 2020, turned some heads there on an otherwise pretty forgettable team. And I just kind of had ups and downs throughout his entire career. In 22, he had some starting opportunities, was a long reliever in opportunities, and pitched really well. And then 23 kind of regressed back to the form we had saw before. So for him to come out after the hip surgery that was clearly lingering on him in 2023 and not only stay healthy, but pitch the best season of his career, it was truly remarkable to watch. And I'm really hoping that he can steady this momentum into 2025.
I've got high expectations for David Peterson. You nailed it. 2023 was like a wash for him. That was an injury year. That was the hip was really bothering him. He goes out, has a surgery, comes back, and he not only was he healthy, but he kind of transformed his pitching style. What we saw early in his career was flashes of dominance with his slider. It was elite for a while, then it faded away for him, and it wasn't consistent. He couldn't get it in the zone for a strike, and guys understood that they didn't have to chase it out of the zone. And he didn't know where to go. Well, this last season, he figured it out. And he started to use the defense behind him. He started to deploy a sinker way more often, get a lot more ground balls. He's an excellent fielding pitcher. He really does a good job of holding runners, of fielding his position, being able to get guys out, no free bases, which is, this last year was a revelation for the Mets as a starting rotation, being able to hold the runners as best they could, but mostly
Oh
field their
yeah.
position. It's never been emphasized the way it was last year. And Peterson owned up to that. I think he's still. I expect him to be as good as he was last year, but he does have another gear that he could go to if he can find consistency with that slider to be able to deploy it. But he doesn't need it anymore to be competitive. If he didn't have his slider before last year, I mean, he was putting up, the eights in certain innings or getting out before the third inning kind of an outing, and you just don't see that from him. He really has matured. He's a competitor through and through. So what I saw from Mark Vientos last year, handling when they signed JD Martinez, he got demoted, came up, had a huge home run, got demoted, and then came back. He kept that mentality. I saw that from David Peterson in 23 and 22, being able to handle those things that are out of his control. And I really saw him mature and become a professional on a level that you need to be competitive. And I really like his mental approach, which is key for a starter to make 30 starts. You got to be able to handle a lot of the things that come your way and not let them affect you on the mound. I love David Peterson. I think he is a great number 3 starter. I think he gives you a chance to win every time he toes the rubber. And that's ultimately what the Mets are looking for.
Yeah, you brought up a handful of really good points there. The one that stuck out to me was the sinker. And that was kind of a uniform theme for a lot of Mets pitchers, not only in the rotation, but the bullpen last year. And Manaea and Peterson kind of became the poster boys for the sinker revolution in the Mets rotation. They both had a top 12 sinker in run value across all starting pitchers in baseball last year. And it was both kind of a new primary pitch in their arsenal. Like you said, Peterson had been a slider guy before. Opponents hit 287 against the slider last year, and you saw sort of a change mid-season, not as pronounced as a delivery change with Shawn Manaea, but a sort of a shift in arsenal and a shift in mindset for David Peterson. He still had those big outings. In September, he struck out 11 against the Red Sox. That was a career high. But it was very clear that he was leaning into the great infield defense that the Mets showed up with last year, obviously headlined by Francisco Lindor. But yeah, he finished top 10 in ERA for pitchers with at least 120 innings, top 6 in home run per 9. Just a really terrific year for David Peterson. And hopefully we can steady that momentum and potentially really see a full season's worth of innings. I'd love to see 150 innings from David Peterson this year. He set a career high last year with 121, steadily been building up from 105 to 111 to 121 last year, but I think the Mets are going to need more from him, even if they don't end up doing the 6-man rotation or whatever. He's going to be in this rotation all year long. I don't think his spot is in any sort of jeopardy, barring some serious underperformance, because the last 3 guys in the rotation, they all have their question marks that come with them. And I think there's no bigger wild card maybe on this entire roster than Clay Holmes, who signed with the New York Mets on a 2-year deal. It felt like a hefty price for a setup man. And then we learned that, no, this is the price for a starting pitcher. The Mets are going to be converting Clay Holmes back into a starting role for the first time since he was a rookie with the Pirates in 2018. Obviously, we're recording this a little bit in advance, but Clay Holmes has been the story of spring training. 9 shutout innings, 12 strikeouts, 2 hits allowed, no walks. Obviously, take spring training stats with a grain of salt, but he has 3 new pitches in his arsenal. He is a sinker first guy. He was a sinker guy before he came to the Mets. People have called it a bowling ball sinker, which I always think is fun. But yeah, there is a lot of this rotation success will depend on how exactly this Clay Holmes experiment pans out, because in one vein, he could be lethal, and in the other, he could be relegated to a bullpen role, and there's kind of no telling where it might end up.
Yeah, this is the wild card. Last year they had a reclamation project in Shawn Manaea and in Luis Severino
Right.
coming off his worst year of his career. and they found a way for him to pitch. This is a different level. Moving a guy from one of the best closers slash setup guys in the league to a starting rotation is a risk, regardless of how you approach it. Obviously, the move to the bullpen is a great failsafe. You know, if it just is a complete failure, getting some production from him from the bullpen would be elite. But I really, again, this goes to their pitching minds. They knew they had good defense. Why not bring in one of the best sinkers in the game to maximize that? And if you have the sinker that he does, you can get easy outs. You can get longer into games than ever before because you get quick outs with that sinker. I really am fascinated by what we're going to see from him. He has a chance to be elite. He's learned a lot from being in the big leagues. He's built. By the way, he's huge.
Yeah, big dude.
You don't see it on TV as much, but in person, this guy's 6'5", 250 pounds, and it's mostly lower half. So he's built like a starting pitcher to be able to handle that kind of workload to throw 180 innings. I don't expect 180 innings from his first year as a starter, but I wouldn't really be surprised if he does this. His stuff plays so well. In the bullpen, his biggest weakness was sometimes he just couldn't find the strike zone. And then when you're only in for one inning and you have to get 3 outs, that will build on you mentally because, you give up 1-2 runs really quick, it's over. But if he has a little bout of, trying to get that sinker in the zone and he's struggling with command, over 5 innings, he can figure that out and work in and dial in. It plays really well. I have high hopes for what Clay Holmes can do as a starting pitcher. I think this pitching coach, like this staff of pitching minds, can help him be the best version of himself in the starting rotation. That power sinker, he's got an absolutely ridiculous slider, and he's got this kick change that he's been working on. It looks like a dream could be happening. I expect him to be really good. But again, you nailed it, though. This is a wild card.
This contract has the capability to be the steal of all steals. 13 mil this year, 13 mil the next year. If Clay Holmes is an effective starting pitcher, that is a bargain for a price considering what some guys signed for. Here's what I'll say. If you have a Yankee fan in your life that's warning you about Clay Holmes, you can just look at the basic numbers. Last 3 years, 189 innings, so a starting pitching's full season. 2.85 ERA, 1.16 whip. Those are pretty good numbers. The thing that stands out to me the most is in that 3-year span of 189 innings, his 68.6 ground ball rate was the highest in baseball. No one yielded the ground ball more than Clay Holmes. It is worth mentioning that the Yankees' infield defense has not been great for the past 3 years. They've been successful in spite of that, but with Gleyber Torres at second, many different guys playing third base for them along the way. I think it's worth mentioning that he wasn't always set up for success behind him and had to try and get the strikeout more into his game. And when Clay Holmes is in the zone a little bit more and not throwing the sinker below the zone, he can get hit pretty hard, especially when he's losing the zone and doesn't have confidence in where the ball is exactly going. Also, there was a lot of discourse about Clay Holmes in leverage situations. He was the Yankees closer for a long time. He lost that job last year, got relegated to a setup role, started pitching better when he was out of the 9th inning. My lights went off again. This is crazy how much this happens. Hang on. Okay. What I was going to say before the lights went off, you know what's more low leverage than the 9th inning and the 8th inning? The 1st inning, Jerry. And the 5th inning. Like that, I think, is the biggest thing here. Like, Clay Holmes has room to fail. Now, if Clay Holmes gives up a run in an inning, it is not the sky is falling because it's not the 9th inning with a 1-run lead. It's the start of the game and the Mets offense has a chance to get back in it. And I really think that is kind of an unmentioned thing that deserves mentioning because Clay Holmes, with room to fail in a 5-inning outing, I think his confidence can go way up, where I feel like at certain points last year, his confidence took massive hits with the New York Yankees. So as it stands right now, he's throwing 60-plus pitches in his outings. He did that for the first time since 2018 this past week. I'm sure the Mets are going to continue to push the envelope there, but he does feel like, at least for April and even May, this is going to be a 5-and-fly guy. I think the Mets are going to try and do their best to protect him, not lean on him too much early in the season, because they want to see this experiment through. They want to give him a fair shot in the starting rotation, and I think if you lean on him a little bit too much, even if he wants that ball deep into games, you could run into some hot water, because 2018 was a very long time ago. What were you doing in 2018? I was a freshman in college.
I was having the worst year of my career. With Mickey Callaway
Sorry to
at the
remind
helm
you.
in
My
New
bad.
York.
I forgot that's kind of a sore spot for you. That's my bad.
Thanks for bringing it up. My son was born, so my
that's
oldest son was
nice.
born. There are some positives in 2018.
Wow, I can't believe the worst year of my career came before my son. That's crazy, Jay.
My oldest son is about to lose, like, he's lost a tooth already, but he's about to lose, like, the big front one.
Oh.
I can't wait. It's so cute.
See, that was a much better anecdote to leave off on.
I appreciate that. Like, my wife is like happy and sad at the same time because it's a big step to see that front tooth come out. But that started in 2018, back when Clay Holmes was a starter.
Time flies when you're Clay Holmes, I guess. But he is in the middle of this rotation. The last two spots are currently, and this could change by the time this episode comes out, Tyler Megill and Griffin Canning. Do you have any idea which one of these two you want to tackle first? It's interesting.
I mean, I feel like you're the Tyler Megill expert.
We
in
have
the
a
world.
complicated relationship.
But I think the complicated relationship is Tyler Megill.
Yeah.
I think he has been that guy. We saw a flash of him being upper 90s dominant Jacob deGrom-esque, opening day start kind of thing. But we've also seen him be a AAA pitcher and not have success in the big leagues. We've seen the American Spork come out. We've seen the high velo. I have no idea what to expect from him, but I do think that you're the expert here, and I will default to what you think.
So you asked me a terrific question before we started doing the show, and we were talking about Jeremy Hefner, and you said, who is one guy that you feel like has not performed to your expectations since Hefner has been the pitching coach of the Mets? And I went back to 2021, and I thought about, Taijuan Walker had a career year. Stroman was a pretty decent, reliable Mets starter. Obviously, deGrom was terrific. Scherzer's regular season stats were great. Kodai Senga had a great year. Like, all these examples of starting pitchers that had some sort of question mark, not even just the 2024 team, and coming here and performing great. Even Chris Bassett gets included in that conversation as well, 2022. The one guy I could think of that has just kind of shocked me with his underperformance has been Tyler Megill. And maybe I was a little too high on him at the start, but I always go back to that first month of 2022 where he was the best pitcher in a stacked rotation, was the guy that had 5 innings of the Mets no-hitter. Like, he had all the makings of someone that was going to become great. And you see it in his brother, Trevor Megill, who's become a great relief pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers. And the Mets have not been able to crack the code with him. I'm not totally sure why, because you look under the hood and you see a lot of things you like. He's 100th percentile in extension. That is really important, especially when you're already throwing 96, 97, 98, because that velo is going to play up. Megill has thrown 8 different pitches as a major leaguer. He's not always using all of them at the same time, but we've seen the American Spork, the splitter, the cutter, the slider, all this stuff. I feel like all the lab techs are in on Tyler Megill. He's this giant human being who has the velo, who has the stuff, and it just hasn't quite converted. And it's not injury related. He is, to me, the biggest mystery in the Mets pitching staff in the 2020s. And we saw flashes last year. I still always think of that start against the Dodgers he had in May, a game that we lost, by the way. 7 shutout innings, 9 strikeouts against their A lineup, Freeman, Betts, all those guys. And it felt like that was going to kickstart maybe him returning to form. And then that kind of went away. And we saw him come up late in the season, make some key starts for us. But right now he's got a spot carved out for him. We've tried him in the bullpen. It hasn't worked. He's been at AAA and has succeeded there a lot. It's become clear that he is above that caliber of pitcher, but somewhere in the middle, and hasn't been able to crack out of that. I wonder what changes they've made, if any, or if they're kind of just rolling him out there again and expecting better results. But Tyler Megill, I don't have a ton of belief in right now, because I don't know what he is. It feels like he still hasn't really found his identity as a pitcher. Like Clay Holmes is the bowling ball sinker guy that's going to get you ground balls. Kodai Senga is going to get you whiffs with his ghost fork. Shawn Manaea with that new deceptive delivery is going to get played up velocity and get his ground balls as well. It feels like Tyler Megill, when I'm describing him to someone, I don't know how to describe his plan of attack, if that makes sense.
It does, because you nailed it. We were talking beforehand about like under the Hefner era, who has, even in the bullpen, name a guy that hasn't met expectations. You think of Jake Diekman, who was himself,
Right.
and it just didn't work out. He was towards the end of his career, later years, and he was wild. He did the same thing. But outside of anyone, the only answer is Tyler Megill. And to me, you nailed it. It isn't that he didn't meet expectations. It's just they don't understand, or he hasn't established who he is as a pitcher to be able to maximize that. His identity, what he brings to the table, it's constantly changing. Pitch mix, volume, sinkers, fastball, four seam, what to do. He hasn't identified himself to maximize that. And I think that's been the frustration from himself, from the fans, from the people that cover him. You don't know what he is. When you're talking about him, you don't think, is he a big swing and miss with the four seamer and then he's got the slider? He's tinkering a lot, trying to find that identity. And at age 29 season, this far into his career, he's got to figure out who he is to be able to maximize that. That is the key. Find your style and maximize it. So he is the biggest question mark. He still could be. He's got the stuff to be an all-star. I don't expect it, but I don't know what to expect. And I think that's the biggest frustration.
And you know what? For everything we've said about David Peterson and all the praise we sung for him, that was his 5th year where it clicked. He was fully healthy. He figured out who he was as a pitcher. It took him 5 years. This is Megill's 5th season. So maybe we see that exact same turning of the corner from him. But I will say that this feels like sort of a last chance for him in the rotation. Like the Mets they have young guys coming up through the pipeline now. Brandon Sproat looks like he's probably going to make an appearance this year. Christian Scott was going to be part of those plans before he got injured. And then they have depth options, and Blackburn and Griffin Canning, Frankie Montas is going to come back. Like they are not shorthanded on starting pitching. It's just set up perfectly for Megill to get an opportunity early in the season. So he can seize that opportunity and completely carve out the spot for himself because, a lot of these guys that I mentioned have bullpen experience, can be swingmen, all that stuff. But it does feel like at age 29 going on 30 this year, it's the last shot for Tyler Megill to really, make a name for himself in this competitive Mets rotation. So he's your 4 starter right now. Your 5 starter is Griffin Canning, who last year pitched his final season with the Los Angeles Angels, allowed the most earned runs in baseball at 99. Had some good years in and out throughout his time with the Angels, but they've never really been known for developing great pitching. They've had a lot of promising guys on their hands that have since left the organization. Patrick Sandoval is another one that comes to mind. Reed Detmers is another one there as well. I'm curious to see what they get out of Griffin Canning, who's another guy with a massive pitch mix. He's another guy that has turned some heads in spring training so far. Originally was signed to, I think, be a part of the bullpen. Signed, I think, for $2 million or $4 million, something very cheap. And now is going to be getting a look in the rotation once again. Another guy I'm kind of curious about, but I don't have a lot of expectations for.
Yeah, he's a 5th starter candidate. I mean, he's got an absolutely elite changeup. His changeup's one of the best in the game. But can he deploy his other parts of his arsenal to get to that changeup? I think that's the biggest question mark. But this is a guy who knows who he is. This is different than Tyler Megill. This is a guy who has established stuff that is a lot easier to tweak and to tinker with from a pitch mix standpoint, from dialing in certain pitches to learning when to deploy those other pitches to maximize. This is a much easier project for a pitching coach like Jeremy Hefner to talk to and be like, look, this is what we need from you. This is the best version of yourself. This is how you should throw, when you should throw it, and where you should throw it. And a guy who has the command that Griffin Canning does with the feel for a changeup, this is the type of guy that they can get the best out of. Now, his ceiling, it's not, Kodai Senga's ceiling. He doesn't throw 99, but you can get an effective fifth starter that a lot of teams would die for. I think he's an interesting project, one that I don't, when you're dreaming of a Mets rotation to compete for the World Series, Griffin Canning isn't a name that pops up. But this guy's a big leaguer that can do some good things, that can have flashes of brilliance. And a changeup plays to lefties and righties. It's you can get outs with that. It's one of my favorite pitches is when a pitcher has a good changeup. It's a beautiful thing to watch. So I've kept an eye on him in spring training, and I've really liked what I've seen so far.
Yeah, he's an experiment, just like a lot of these guys that we've mentioned. He's going to be an interesting guy to watch in April. He feels like probably the first man out if someone becomes healthy, like Manaea or Montas. But it's all going to be dependent on performance. I feel like the Mets have put themselves in a good situation where it's sort of a land of opportunity with the starting rotation. If you perform well, you might have a spot for yourself going forward when the ace comes back into the fold. And there's depth behind these guys as well. Paul Blackburn was acquired midseason at the deadline last year. We didn't see much of him because of an ill-timed injury. Also kind of a funky injury. It was a spinal fluid injury. I'm not super familiar
Blackburn,
with what went down there.
Crazy.
Hopefully he's healthy. It sounded pretty scary when I learned some details of it. A guy that's been an all-star before, another guy with a very deep pitch mix that doesn't rely on velocity, kind of a similar profile to Canning altogether. He's currently the long reliever for the Mets, which kind of surprised me because he was more established with a resume as a starting pitcher over the last 3 years. So he's probably going to be competing for a spot. And then we've seen some other guys turn some heads in spring training. Brandon Sproat was someone we mentioned before. He got reassigned to minor league camp. I'm sure that they're going to give him some seasoning at AAA because he was a very fast riser through the minor leagues last year. And I think he just got a little tired once he reached that highest level. But I would not be shocked to see him deployed in a similar way to Christian Scott, like maybe late May, early June. The Mets need some help in their rotation or they want to give guys a rest. Brandon Sproat could come up and get an opportunity there. He throws very, very hard, and the Mets drafted him twice. That's how much they liked him. And then Max Kranick is the other one who's been turning some heads in spring training. Currently has a bullpen spot, but has been a starting pitcher in the past. Profiles as a long reliever. So again, not the household names, but all of them are kind of curiously interesting.
So I wanted to talk just a touch on Paul Blackburn.
Yeah.
This is a guy who knows how to pitch. He has 42 different pitches that he can deploy at any given time. He fills the zone. He's not afraid to walk guys and understand the lineup. He just knows how to maximize what he brings to the table. He's got a good changeup. He's got a good cutter. He's got a curveball that he's smart about. This, to me, is a fifth starter fill-in guy that makes a lot of sense because he's not going to be an ace of anybody's staff. But if you need an outing that is predictable and you need 5 innings of, 3-run ball, this is the kind of guy that is over 162 games is a huge piece of your team that can fill that role, give you competitive innings and be able to go. I like what he brings to the table. I feel personally like Paul Blackburn is probably the fifth starter right now because of a predictability standpoint. When you have a guy like Clay Holmes and Kodai Senga coming off of injuries, you don't know what you're going to get from those guys. It's nice to know what you're going to get from that fifth starter spot. But he's good enough to go back and forth in between the bullpen and maybe play that Trevor Williams role if need be. I like Paul Blackburn, and I think he's a solid piece to have in your rotation.
Yeah, I think the only edge I give it to Canning for sure is the workload. Canning threw 171 innings last year, 127 the year before. Blackburn's career high is 111 in 2022. I wonder if the Mets are going to be leaning on a guy that they know can give them 6-7 innings, even if it's not the most quality 6-7 innings, just to help out their bullpen because, we know this very well. In April and May of last year, they got no length out of their starting pitching. They got injuries in their bullpen, and then that exacerbated the whole issue of the walks and blown leads and all that stuff. So I'm sure that's something they're going to try and actively avoid this year. And then, I'm curious about Brandon Sproat. I'd really love to see him get an opportunity. It's been a long time since the Mets have developed a young, exciting starting pitcher back when they did it, 6 times in 1 year in 2015. It's been a long time coming. David Peterson was kind of a peeking into that last year in year 5 of his development. It would be cool to see a rookie come up and succeed, sort of like Christian Scott did before his untimely injury. We're going to miss him all this year due to Tommy John surgery. And then Max Kranick's that last guy. I don't know what to think of him. I like that he's a childhood Mets fan. That speaks to me a lot. Guys that deal in spring training, sometimes, they go by the wayside and it's a storyline that gets forgotten completely. But roster resource has him currently in the bullpen as a middle reliever. We'll see, man. We'll see. I like what I see after a long 45-minute discussion about the rotation. I look at the division rivals and the Phillies and the Braves, and yes, they absolutely have the name value. The Phillies rotation is probably the best in baseball. I don't think that's too hyperbolic to say, between Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Chris Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, Jesus Luzardo. That is a stacked 1 through 5, and even the Braves.
Luzardo as a 5th starter.
Luzardo as a 5th starter is insane
because he could be, his ceiling is Cy Young.
Yeah, I mean, if you put him in the Mets rotation, where does he land? I think he's our 2 starter, probably, right? Yeah,
potentially could be.
Yeah,
but what the Mets lack in top end depth, they make up for elsewhere. I don't know much about Max Kranick. There's not a lot out there. I mean, what has he thrown? 40 innings in the big leagues?
I think so, yeah. His first start was significant because he came up and he threw 5 perfect innings in his debut, which is wild.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got good stuff. He'll be a guy that the Mets lean on one way or the other. He'll throw innings, and we've done an exhausting dive into this rotation. There's going to be people that come in that we have no idea. There'll be names that we've never heard of. That's the beauty of baseball. But Kranick could be a guy. Blackburn, Canning. Yeah, man, it's going to be okay. But they have decent depth. And when Manaea comes back to kind of anchor that rotation, then Frankie Montas can come back and be healthy, and they can be patient with him. Just be competitive. Just to give your bullpen a chance to lock down some innings in your offense to win a few games.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me with Kranick and also Blake Tidwell, who we didn't mention before, is they spent the year in the minor leagues last year with the Mets, the whole season, and they got time in development and stuff like that. So they've been tinkered with for a calendar year. Kranick has last pitched in 2022, so he spent some time with the Mets here, and I'm curious to see what revelations they've made. What changes they've made. But yeah, I think you definitely give the edge to the Phillies in the rotation. The Braves rotation is also kind of weird. Like, Chris Sale is coming off a Cy Young, but who knows if he can stay healthy. He got hurt at the end of last year. Reynaldo Lopez's velo is way down in spring training right now. And then their last 3, Schwellenbach had a great season last year, but Grant Holmes is a career reliever in the minor leagues. And Ian Anderson, we haven't really seen since the 2021 World Series. So I look up and down this division, and sure, you can absolutely view the Mets rotation as a weakness of the team right now, but I think it's just because the team's really talented, and you don't really know what exactly you can get out of any of these guys. And we said it at the top of the show. I'll say it here again. We were having these same discussions last year, and that unit performed really well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of this era of the Mets. Their rotation is, we can maximize what we've got. It doesn't jump off the page as a guy I don't want to face outside of, I think Manaea is in that realm. I think Kodai Senga brings some fear into some lineups. Clay Holmes has the ability to do that, but outside of that, you just think and believe that the Mets know how to get the best out of their starters. Zach Wheeler's an easy one. Just set it and forget it kind of thing. Aaron Nola is established guy. They don't have the Spencer Strider type top end starter, but I think they have a lot of guys that could do that at times. And I think they'll give them enough for a playoff spot and a chance to push through, barring major injury.
We will see. They have my trust. Go ahead.
They have the willingness to make trades if need be.
That's true.
I think there's guys out there that if the Mets see a dire need, there's this crazy guy named Sandy Alcantara down in Miami that's available.
He might get traded by the time this comes out.
That's true.
It's
You know,
very
the
true.
the Yankees fans out there with Garrett Cole going under the knife are panicking and trying to push for that guy. But there's going to be starting pitching available for a price. So I think that's the approach that this team took. You know, David Stern says, I'm not willing to give Corbin Burns, those max years, but if we need to go out and get somebody, they can have a pick of teams that aren't as competitive that are willing to move off of a player like that to fill in. So if this isn't the unit, I imagine they'll go out and make some adjustments.
You mentioned some trade stuff. The list of names that are going to be free agents after this season that could potentially be rental guys this year are a lot of fun names. I mean, I said Kevin Gossman is here, Michael King is here, Seth Lugo's here. Like, there's a lot of talent. So yes, if the Mets need to make a move at the deadline, which they've done each of the last 4 years, Javi Baez in 21, they obviously didn't do enough in 22, the sell-off in 23, and then guys like Blackburn last year and Jesse Winker. The Mets are expected to be active at the deadline one way or the other.
Did you not say Vogelback?
I didn't mention him.
Okay,
I
sorry.
didn't mention him. This bullpen could really use a Colin Holderman right now. I just realized. How's he doing? How's he doing?
Reacquisition.
Where's JD Davis at? What's he up to? But yeah, so it's going to be, the Mets are going to piece it together, man. I wouldn't be surprised. I think we did this in our over-unders last year where we picked how many guys we thought would get a start for the Mets overall on the season. I think the line was 12 and it ended up being 12. I mean, you got a Julio Teheran start in there, Joey Lucchesi in game 162, but I think it's going to be around that number again. I think it's going to be a dozen guys that get an opportunity, and I think that's a good thing because the Mets are putting guys out there that they trust and believe in, and that just means they have tons of depth.
Yep, agreed.
Jerry, I think that's it, man.
I think so. I think we ended I think we analyzed it the way it is on paper. I mean, not elite, solid potential, decent depth. They'll have to get to, and then the injuries are hopefully done, and they'll be able to come back. And they're really going to miss Manaea. I don't want to understate the fact that him being out any potential. They're really banking on him being the anchor of this rotation, and him being down to start the year stinks. But I think they have enough to be able to tread water until he returns.
So by the time you're done listening to this episode, you at home, the Mets versus Yankees spring training game is about to get going. And then there's going to be 2 off days. And then the Mets head to Houston to play in Minute Maid Park for their opening series of the season against the Houston Astros on Thursday. 6-game road trip to start the year. Blech. But baseball's here, baby. And it was very fun to deep dive into this very talented and intriguing roster with tons of reclamation projects, experiments, and superstar talent. It was very fun it was good for me to familiarize myself with all the guys on this 26-man, 40-man roster. But yeah, I had a lot of fun, Jerry.
Good. Pleasure covering it with you, Jolly.
Next time we chat, it'll be covering regular season baseball for the New York Mets. Thank you so much to listening to this episode and hopefully all of our team profile and projection episodes in the month of March. If you enjoyed them, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please leave a like on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a review on podcast apps. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your pods, leave us a review, a rating. We'd really appreciate it. Next time we chat, like I said, it'll be covering regular season Mets baseball. We can't wait. We'll see you next time. LFGM.
LGM.
Jerry and Charlie, Shea Station. Jerry and Charlie, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time, where we'll be back.
Station.